Welcome. My name is Rebecca Harding. It has been my honor and pleasure to serve as the president of the Museum Educators of Southern California for the past year. Thank you. My day job, I'm actually the Associate Director of Learning and Engagement at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. And every time I say that, I ask my boss if we could please shorten my title or shorten the institution, one of the two. It's a mouthful. I actually want to start off because I should not be up here today. I actually feel that all my team members should be up here. So if you are a current board member for MESC, would you guys please stand and just give a giant round of applause to the amount of work and effort that went into making today possible? Many of them are still running registration outside. And last, I also just want to recognize that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. I don't know if many of you know, but MESC is actually one of the longest running museum educator groups. So if you have previously served on the MESC board, do you mind standing so we could also recognize you for your time? And thank you. So as we were preparing for today, I got very excited because MESC has been going through kind of a reimagining over the past couple of years. And we couldn't have done that without the previous board that kind of gifted us this opportunity to kind of see what could MESC look like if we brought it into the future. We're now 41 years from its beginning, and it's been a little bit of a process with the way things have had to go. I'm sure many of you who work in museums understand that sometimes we are paper people. We like to keep everything in paper printed. So when you have a volunteer board organization, paper does not our friend, because there's a lot of records of what we've done and what we haven't done that now live in people's, drawers or filing cabinets at MoCA. So when we were able to kind of take this opportunity to think about what could MESC look like now, we went through a board retreat with the previous board and drafted a new mission statement for the future. When MESC began, the mission statement was actually to strive to ensure that museums place education at the center of all museums. And that makes sense for a mission statement that comes out of the 1970s, where we were advocating for our field to be professionalized. Well, it's been professionalized. We're 41 years later, and there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. And so last year, we announced our new mission at the annual institute that was held at JANM. But we are an inclusive alliance of critically aware museum educators who cultivate and build strategic relationships rooted in sharing resources and encouraging experimentation that empowers the field. And the values that really drive us are transparency, community, inclusivity, solidarity, because in order for us to actually make that happen, to advance the field and move forward, we have to embrace those key values. So in thinking about that today, I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of what we've been doing with our time for the past year. I recognize it might have felt like MESC went dark for a little bit, but we certainly did not. We were just working very hard behind the scenes to bring us into the 21st century, to move away from paper stuck in files at MoCA and into the 21st century where we can share all of our resources. And that is not a dig at MoCA. Thank you for being our archives for 41 years. Very much appreciated. But today, we're so excited to be spending the afternoon with you. And so I'll kind of go, this is how the day is going to run. I'm just going to kind of share kind of our annual report of where we're at, what we have been doing. Then we're going to transition into a wonderful plenary panel that we've put together. We're going to have a live podcast here, which is generously sponsored by AAM's One Good Thing. And then we're going to have some great breakout discussions and then end with a happy hour, because who doesn't like booze? Okay. So to get things started, to kind of talk about what we've been focusing our time on, we really focused on membership and community engagement. So one of the things that was really difficult was serving kind of this one-size-fits-all model. Museum educators are varied, and specifically in the 21st century, the word educator sometimes feels wrong when you say it, because there are many people in this room who might do more than just gallery teaching. There are designers who see themselves as educators. We as educators are lifelong learners. We might be doing public programs, we might be doing field trips, we might be doing outreach, we might be gallery assistants. So it's very difficult for us to think about what does that programming look like that's going to hit every single person. So instead this year, what we've been thinking about and questioning are how do we serve different content areas and different professional levels? And in that, let's abandon this one-size-fits-all model. Let's embrace experimentation and celebrate it and adopt a fail-forward mentality. And so that's kind of what we've been doing. So we start off The year we started with a MESC Features workshop with the wonderful Alyssa Machado, hosted at LACMA, where we looked at her Dream Space project. And it was a really great working group for her to not only share her publication of how do we deal with the systemic issues of power in museums, but also then what could we do for our personal practice. We hosted a couple MESC community events. These hashtag MESC community events are meant to be informal, encouraging us to get out and actually enjoy the field that we work in. So we went to Jazz Night at LACMA, we went to Little Tokyo and went to Janum and Mocha at the Geffen. And of course, the booze. We went to CAM and we said to everybody, hey, that overpriced program that's $55 and you get really terrible appetizers that are this big, come to CAM Happy Hour. We're gonna have nachos and enjoy your people, talk about the conversations that are happening there so we can kind of make those connections. We also decided to host a leadership luncheon. And what we wanted to do was encourage the leadership of museums in education to come together and actually talk about how can MESC work with these departments to be a critical resource for their teams and staff, which is really wonderful. And it looks like this is now going to be a quarterly event that we do moving forward. So this is kind of the programming and engagement that we've been up to for the past year. Beyond that, we've been really thinking about how do we sustainably keep MESC in the future, in that 21st century, and we've been doing it through a lot of different ways. Strategic planning was a big part of that. So we looked at our fiscal budget and determined we need an annual budget. It doesn't come in on side to side. Have a reserve of that just in case, for whatever reason, grant money doesn't come in on side to side. In addition, we moved our membership forms out of an Excel doc spreadsheet to an actual CRM system, Wild Apricot, which allows each of you to have a login information or a login to our website. You can update your information and always stay in touch with MESC. We moved our financials to, again, from Excel spreadsheets to QuickBooks, where we can actually see where we're spending our money and be able to make those choices. The people at MoCA and our board have been doing a very, very long, year-long project of digitizing everything that was in those filing cabinets, so we have access to that moving forward. We've also shifted away from PayPal, born out of the 1990s, and moved to Square, where we can actually, take payments wherever we go. And we use Zoom video conferencing for our board to meet on a regular basis, so we're not having to get through traffic, and people get frustrated with that. In addition, it was really important for us to figure out different ways that we could share what we were doing with the field. So we went social, and we've started an Instagram and a Twitter, and if you don't follow us, please do. It's really fun. We're trying to not only highlight different things that are happening in Los Angeles, but also some behind the scenes of what goes into that work. We built a brand new website. Has anybody been on it? Can I just give a giant round of applause? I know David is not here, but that was a huge undertaking. So David Hernandez at LACMA, he is our web chair. He redesigned our website as well as did a full brand redesign for us. So we have a fresh new look and feel. We also shared our work at 2 different national conferences. We put together a session called Cultivating Learning Communities and connected with 2 other museum education roundtable groups in the country. And then we also presented at NAEA talking about leading from where you are. So if you're not finding that in your organization, being a part of organizations like MESC gives you opportunity to grow professionally. I'm going to kind of shift into where we're going for today, and I leave a quote from Laura Lott, who's the current president of the American Alliance of Museums. I had the opportunity to go to AAM this year, and they were really focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And it's great to see the field talking about it in a way that this is the work that we need to be doing. And there's a lot of it for us to do, which heavily influenced kind of the theme of where we are today. But in her most recent blog post, she said, "I'm reminded once again that this is the power of museums, to mark, to preserve, sometimes celebrate, and sometimes grieve our history and culture, but always to strive for better understanding, reflection, and fulfillment." And what I really feel she did was just re-quote a really great movie, Spider-Man, that with great power comes great responsibility. And that's what we're here today. We are here with that responsibility to harness our power and to address the issues that we have within our work and in our institutions that lead to race, ethnicity, and cultural hegemony in museum education. So I just want to say thank you for being here today. We are so excited to get going, and I'm going to welcome Rachel Stark, our lovely host, who allowed us to come here to the Skirball, up to the stage along with MARIEL.
She's so tall. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all today. This is really like a homecoming for me in a lot of ways. So I'm Rachel Stark. I'm the Associate Director of Education here at the Skirball Cultural Center. I'm going to take this off of here like that. Can you hear me? How's that? Okay. So I'm really pleased to see you all. I know lots of the faces in this room. It feels good to be in this room with so many of you. How many of you, is this your first time to the Skirball? Oh, a few of you. How many of you have been here before? Okay. That's nice. That makes me feel good. Well, we're really pleased to have you here today. I spent a couple of years on the MESC board, and I know how much work goes into planning an event like this, so I want to extend my gratitude especially to the full MESC board and to MARIEL ROWLAND, who is part of the MESC board and a former Skirball staffer who had a big role to play in bringing today's event here, so thank you, MARIEL. I also want to thank Anna Gross, who's sitting behind the video camera, who's our in-house admin extraordinaire and educator and everything, and she's the one who made it all come together. So the seats you're sitting in are courtesy of her and everything else. So thank you very much. You know, I think I've been thinking about this theme that we're having today and thinking about how we honor diverse communities, how we honor the people who walk through our doors and sometimes don't walk through our doors. And, you know, here at the Skirball Cultural Center, we're a Jewish American institution that is founded on the principle of welcome. We think about that aspect of welcome in everything we do, and we seek to be a meeting place across generations and across cultures. So this idea of who comes through our doors, who doesn't, how do we serve our audience, who is not being seen and heard, what language are we using on our tours. We can have a million sessions about inclusivity training, but there is still so much more work to be done, and I know all of the team that's here, assembled throughout the room, really works hard here at the Skirball to think about those things, but we're just honored to be among all of you to kind of move it forward even further. And beyond the facilitation that we present in our programming, I know many of you have a hand in exhibition development as well and think about the collection that is presented. And we think a lot about that here too. And I hope today you'll have a chance to spend some time in our galleries. If you haven't been to Noah's Ark here, I hope you spend some time. It's really all about the value of second chances and about a diverse community coming together and weathering life's storms. We also have lots of fun stuff coming up this summer, including the Jim Henson exhibition, Imagination Unlimited. You might have seen the banner coming in. The show opens on Friday night, and I hope you will come back and spend the summer with us, me and Kermit and friends. We are really excited about the show because Jim Henson was someone our curator calls a person who had radical empathy, somebody who used the power of media and technology to tell stories about a diverse group of characters and worlds who came together and really worked to build a better world. So I know you all have a lot to see and do today, so I want to let you all get on with the show, to borrow a line from Kermit. Have a good day.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Anna, and everyone at the Skirball who's been beyond generous in hosting this event and for all the help and support you've given us for the MESC board. And just, I feel like this is a community that you don't ever leave once you're part of it. I forever feel grateful for you. And so my name is MARIEL ROWLAND. I'm the Diversity, Inclusivity, and Accessibility Chair or board member for MESC. And I really want to thank you all for coming today and showing up and choosing to engage in this conversation. I think, these can be hard conversations, but they're very important. And I think if we all keep an open mind and listen to each other and are intentional about our words today, we'll leave with something good. So I want to turn our attention to these 5 incredible women in the front row. These women have been pushing beyond the limits historically set forth in this field, and they are true leaders. And I want to thank them for coming here and welcome them on the stage. So if we could all give them a round of applause. So if I could welcome Betty Avila on the stage. ROBYN HETRICK. PAULA SANTOS. Alina Muslar. And ANURADHA VIKRAM. So we're gonna switch things up a little, and instead of me reading their bios, they're gonna give an intro to themselves. And Anu is gonna be our moderator and also speak as a panelist. Okay, let's do this.
3 minutes is not a long time. Okay, so I'm Betty Avila. I'm co-director at Self-Help Graphics and Art. But I've been sort of all over in terms of the art and culture sector. I've worked for large performing arts institutions, large museum institutions, and also, like Self-Help, other grassroots arts and culture organizations. So I've seen a little bit of everything. And one of the current projects that we're working on that I want to share with you, I was kind of back and forth, but I'm going to share about a project that we did called Jornaleros. And we've done one round. We want to revisit and do another. But essentially, we've taken our art making, our studio process, and opened it up to become more accessible to other members of our community who don't necessarily identify as artists, like day laborers and like street vendors, or small business owners, entrepreneurs who don't even use those words to describe themselves yet, but could use the kind of products and processes that Self-Help Graphics has to offer to enhance their work and really to support them economically. So it's something that we've been thinking about growing. This is really a pilot project that we did last year, supported through a very specific grant through the NEA. But we're really thinking through what are the ways that, in addition to supporting artists in our community, we're opening up the artistic processes to the many people that inhabit the space, immediately to Self-Help Graphics, but also citywide.
Hi, I'm ROBYN HETRICK. I am Director of Public Events at the AUTRY Museum, and in that role, I'm also the Managing Director of our resident theater company, Native Voices at the AUTRY. And I was trying to figure out because we were asked to speak about one project that we're currently working on that speaks to this theme. And really, for me, this is the needle that we thread every day. The AUTRY is a museum dedicated to the art, history, and culture of the American West. Our mission statement is so broad as to be unachievable by ourselves. It is to tell the diverse stories of all the peoples of the American West, connecting the past to the present to inspire our shared future. Now, the first part of that, there's no way that one institution can carry a payroll big enough to tell the diverse stories of all the people of the American West. So my job is largely to seek partnerships, collaborations, and opportunities throughout Los Angeles, which really has put us, I often go back and say to my colleagues, if you've never been to the AUTRY and you go out there, the thing we always hear about people, the people say about the AUTRY is this isn't what I thought it was going to be, if you've never been. They think it's a cowboy western museum, and it's decidedly not that, but how do we make people understand that? And then how do we decide which projects we can achieve and which projects we just have to let go for now? And which ones are being done successfully by other partners in Los Angeles, and let's not be a Me Too. Let's not look at them and do that. We recently, I decided I would talk about a project we let go several years ago, which is a Dia de los Muertos festival that we put a lot of effort into. And on paper, it looked exactly like the kind of program a museum should be doing. It was a cultural festival. It was celebrating a particular culture, and we were working with community partners to do it. And then 2 weeks later, in Native American Heritage Month, we were hosting an American Indian Arts Festival working with Native American artists. As a staff, as an institution, we could not support both. We just weren't enough people to be successful at both. And in the public mind, they started to look like the same festival. So we weren't actually even honoring the audiences we wanted to honor because the public didn't understand the difference, and we had to choose one, which was kind of like asking to split the baby in half, right? How am I going to choose? And what we did was look at who else is doing either of these things. Well, in Los Angeles, lots of people are celebrating the Day of the Dead and doing it very successfully and have legitimacy to do so, and no one else was promoting Native American art. So we chose to concentrate all of our efforts on the project where we could make the most difference. And that's the point that I was hoping to bring today, which is each of us has to choose personally and in our jobs and in our institutions, where can we make the most difference? And what things do we need to allow other people to succeed in so that we don't dilute our efforts?
So my name is PAULA SANTOS, and I'm currently at LACMA, and I just moved back home from being away for 15 years. So immersing myself back in Los Angeles has brought up a lot of different ideas and issues that I have been grappling with being away. And in a certain way, that also means not being as close to, they weren't my people the same way that in Los Angeles they are my people. But all of that to say is that I think very much until maybe a couple years ago, I would define myself very much by the institutions I worked in, the projects I'm working on. But then I feel like I had kind of an epiphany through the collective work of many of my colleagues, which is that you have to figure out what your life's work is, and then everything else will come along. So a couple of projects that currently speak to this in my work is that I did start this podcast called Cultura Conscious 1 year ago. And that was a really huge step for me. It's completely something that I decided I'm going to buy this recording equipment and start talking to people, or even just start recording the conversations I was having with colleagues. And then the other project that actually brought me to Los Angeles, it wasn't LACMA itself that brought me to Los Angeles. It was this project in particular, which is that we are working in South Los Angeles. And the complexity of that project and the not only internally, but also within the many communities of South Central, that's really the core of museum education work for me, and really where we should be institutionally in any part of the country, thinking about ourselves in a very decentralized way. Ourselves, I mean institutions, and decentralizing them. And also stop fetishizing objects so much in the same way. But yeah, I guess the project is that I am thinking about my life's work, what that means as an individual, and that what I can bring to an institution, specifically in the projects that I am working on.
Good afternoon, everybody. How we doing? Good. I like to converse with the people that I'm around, and so you'll probably find me engaging with you bit by bit. But my name is Elena Muslar, and I am a creative career coach and cultural experience producer. So my full-time job, because I have many, my full-time job is I'm the Assistant Director for Entertainment and Fine Arts Professions at Loyola Marymount University. So what that long list of words means is that I work in our Career and Professional Development Office at the university, specifically matched to 2 colleges on our campus, the College of Communication and Fine Arts and our School of Film and Television. So on a regular basis, I am having conversations with that next generation that we're all hoping to cultivate and have, take over and be a part of our institutions. And my background is in working in arts administration and presenting the arts, and ironically, it feels really weird but beautiful in a way to be here at the Skirball. This is the last place I worked at. And so now the work that I'm able to do is on the ground with young people and people of all ages, as I don't like to limit my services in coaching to just the students that I am full-time contracted to. I also serve as an advisory board member for Emerging Arts Leaders Los Angeles. So the importance of professional development is like something that courses through my veins. I'm obsessed with it. I'm like so happy you all are here getting your professional development on. Because the way that I talk about it with my students is it's not something that, oh yeah, there's this extra budget line you gotta fight for to have it, or you just pay for it out of your own pocket. Professional development is something that is a priority. We aren't able to continue to, immerse ourselves in the fields that we want to be a part of unless we're continuing to educate ourselves through the narratives of what's going on in that field on a regular basis. So I call my work like rocket fuel for potential. And that's something that I think is a lot more fun than just saying professional development. And one last thing I'll mention, through LMU, a project that I've done is something we call our Career Treks program, where we take students to different arts and cultural organizations all across Los Angeles and across the nation. And so I've been able to lead two, one in Los Angeles specifically for arts and culture, and another in New York focusing on the performing arts. So I think that no matter what industry you're in, you can be a part of advocating for the importance and viability of working in an arts workforce.
Hi, I'm Anu VIKRAM, and I'm going to use my moderator privilege today to show you guys something, although we weren't supposed to do that. So I am the artistic director at 18th Street Art Center. Oh, and I just opened the wrong browser. Yeah, go me. And the reason I want to show you this particular project is actually because it came up when we were trying to address some of these specific questions that we're coming up with today. So, 18th Street Art Center is a 30-year-old organization. We're an artist residency program. We do commissioned exhibition projects and public projects with contemporary artists from all over the world. We bring artists from all over the world to come and stay on the west side of Los Angeles, engage with the community here, interact with local artists in the communities of the west side. And we also make space for LA-based artists to live and work on our campus year-round. So we have a lot of things we're doing on a daily basis, supporting individual artists, each of whom are running their own practices, sometimes running small institutions out of their studios. We also present exhibition programming. We also have a number of other nonprofits on our site who present their own programming independent of us. We maintain the 5-building site. It is our endowment. We own the property. And we've been in Santa Monica in the Pico neighborhood for 30 years now. And so around our 25th anniversary, which was around the time I joined the organization, myself and our executive director, Jan Williamson, started asking ourselves what we mean, 18th Street, to the Pico neighborhood itself. Pico neighborhood is a historically working class, multi-ethnic group community of small homeowners predominantly. African American, Japanese American, Mexican American communities have been very well entrenched in this area of inland Santa Monica. You can see here on our map the clustering of icons kind of shows you what the Pico borders are like. And so, the general public thinks of Santa Monica as a very affluent, very white, very kind of coastal community, right? And all of the implications of its liberalism and its relative wealth and so on. But the Pico actually has still quite a different character, and also the Pico has been subject to quite a bit of transformation over the last 10 to 20 years, especially as the technology industries have made their way onto LA's west side. And so with that comes a huge shift in the physical landscape, the architectural landscape, the housing landscape, the economic and business landscape. And 18th Street, because we own our property, has remained in our site, while other institutions, such as many of the galleries at Bergamot Station, which is near us, as well as the Santa Monica Museum of Art, have departed for other pastures. So we found ourselves at this crucial moment trying to figure out what it means to be an arts organization, and particularly an organization that is artist-facing rather than primarily audience-facing, in a threatened neighborhood with specific needs and specific communities in this moment. And we wanted to work with contemporary artists from all over the country and all over the world and all over Los Angeles who represent the incredible diversity that we have here. And at the same time, we realized that there were some things we needed to do that contemporary artists simply couldn't do by themselves, even if they identified as social practice artists, because they didn't know the PICO. Who knew the PICO? Well, at the time, Jan Williamson, our executive director, had been there 21 years, so she really did know the PICO. But she's one person. So we had to ask the question, how does 18th Street, as an institution that we would like to keep going in perpetuity, how does 18th Street know the PICO? And how does the PICO know 18th Street? And that's when we realized, well, not very well. So that's how we developed this cultural asset map. So we were fortunate that we got funding from the Irvine Foundation to do it. You can go to culturemapping90404.org and look at it yourself. I don't have time to show it to you, I regret. But what's really important here is that this is community generated. So that meant that we had to do a community-based education project. We had to make it possible for our neighbors to get the training to do this oral history work from us for free so that they could create this map with us. So we had to provide technical support, which was making the website and also making the videos, a lot of editing. And I want to give MARIEL a shout out because she started this whole thing when she was our Getty intern several years ago. So it's now complete and published and fully bilingual. And I think it's possibly the best thing we've ever done because as an institution that feels very strongly that social practice is our milieu, and that means we need to be accountable to communities and not just sort of tinker with people's lives as aesthetic enjoyment, but really be meaningful in our engagement. And so the Cultural Asset Map is a really important piece of that institutional development toward really giving our neighbors a stake to hold in our institution. Thank you. So today, the questions that we wanted to kick around, we had a couple of questions that were facing more toward how our institutions function, and then we have a final question which is really about us individually as employees in institutions and working independently and how we negotiate the topics under discussion today. So the first question that I want to put to the group is, what kind of institutions are we building that center historical and cultural equity for diverse communities? And how do we define racial equity according to institutional policies and prerogatives? And please draw on specific examples, if you would.
Betty, you want to go first? No, go ahead. Sure, I'll jump in. Looking at how our institutions are today, very specifically today, even in the last 18 months, the world has changed for all of us in ways that I don't think we anticipated it was going to. For me, as the last holdout of the baby boomer generation, it was already changing as millennials come on board, having a different life view. So I've been around long enough to know that the only constant is change. The kind of change we're seeing now is a little bit painful in our society, but through that is the opportunity for something much better. And the fact that we're having the conversations out loud within at least our own institution, I think is fantastic. I'm hopeful that all of our institutions are having these conversations because at the end of the day, we choose hope. That's what we're all in the business of doing is providing hope that tomorrow can be better for our having invested in this. Within our own institution, it means willingness to have very hard conversations. In my role as managing director of our theater company, we have a founding artistic director, Randy Reinholz, who has been with the theater company for 25 years and someday wants to retire. That someday is looming rather soon. And I'm looking at needing to replace that artistic voice within the theater company. Native Voices produces new works for the stage by Native American playwrights, Native American, First Nations, Indigenous playwrights. And having the conversations internally and creating a safe space where we can have those conversations to say, I need to replace this individual. I am not Native, but I sit in a leadership role. We need to have Native people in leadership roles within the theater company. How do I then go about attracting a Native person? In the state of California, and just as a matter of personal principle, I'm not going to put out a job description that says only people of this ethnicity may apply. That's not a conversation I can legally have. And yet, I need a person who has real deep ties to Native communities. Now, that person may be non-Native and may exist out there, and I need to open up our search in a way that is inclusive of all the peoples of California. It could be that someone from Japanese American descent has some connections to Native community and strong theater background. It's being able to have those conversations internally. Your best friend is going to be in your human resources department. What can I do legally? How can you advise me? How can I open this up so that it is a fair search, but it is also then fair to the communities that I'm going to be serving?
I think I really mulled over this question because there are institutions and organizations that have been built in the image of communities that have needed them. And especially museums, we're always kind of trailing behind and trying to figure out, well, how do they do things? You know, there's so many examples across the country, and I always come back to the example of Chicago because Chicago is an amazingly radical city that is incredibly community-oriented. But, you know, there's a huge museum there on Mexican art that was started by school teachers that their entire existence is because someone decided, oh, we need art here. And no one else is doing it, so we're just going to do it ourselves. And there are many examples in Los Angeles of people who are doing that kind of work. So this idea that we have to build it, we have to do it, we also have to examine that, like, why does it have to be us? And if it is us, then what do we bring to the table? Is it resources? Is it the fact that we're the ones who have the money, so we're the ones who build it? And then what are the implications of that?
I was kind of thinking as you were saying that about two different, I guess, museums that come to mind, but is this loud enough? Can y'all hear me? Okay, because I'm like, can I hear myself? One that comes to mind is, well, for me, I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, and the place that I was always taken to on field trips as an African-American young woman was the California African-American Museum. And I had a weird sense of pride and dread with going to that museum because it was the place you walk through and you learn about your ancestors and everybody's slavery, and it's really sad, and that was it. And then you went back to your school and you lived your life. And over the time of being a cultural worker and starting to work in institutions that are having these conversations and talking about, you know, how do we continue to diversify our board and our staff? I kept finding myself thinking about the origins of places that I was exposed to, a place like the California African American Museum. And over time, you know, it has changed so much in terms of how it has engaged with the community, how it has prioritized community, and how it has evolved with the understanding of how communities evolve. You know, I've been going back a lot more now for the different programming, and I think the biggest thing that it speaks to is when you embrace leadership change and you take the time to find the right person, and you go through growing pains in order to find the right people to bring in a new era of change, that is extremely impactful. And it can create a ripple effect. And so looking at the leadership that's there now, I think it's really strong. And I think that there are lots of other institutions across the nation that we can also be looking at as examples. A place I got the pleasure of working at was the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. And the way that they talk about what it is that they do is that, you know, like art isn't the center of what they do. It's social practice. It's everything around community and being responsive to the way the world is working. Like, I remember their Instagram showing, you know, when He Who Must Not Be Named was put into power, they noted it and they took a stance. And that doesn't mean that every institution has to be that political, but it does mean, how do you respond to today? Not just the past, because I think people have an idea of museums just honoring the past as well.
This is hard. I feel like I can talk about this forever. So coming from a culturally specific organization that in some ways was formed out of a need to create space for artists of color, for Latino artists, Chicano artists, because there weren't spaces for them in the existing institutions and in the existing arts organizations at the time. You fast forward 45 years and the situation's not so different, actually. But I think when thinking about how are we moving institutions in this direction, and from our position as a community-based organization, I often talk about self-help graphics sort of straddling the community-based world and the fine art world, and that we act as a bridge for a lot of artists who will come through our studio and who would otherwise not be looked at by some of these major institutions that we have relationships with. But because they've gone through self-help, they have that sort of self-help stamp of approval, they end up in these collections. And so I guess I'm just thinking about what's the process so that one day self-help doesn't have to be that bridge, where we are a bridge, but we're not the only way that some of these artists get access. And for me, that process is a long, sort of arduous process, having been in major institutional spaces. And I think one of the things that I've seen happen, and I don't want to divulge where I've seen this, but there's initiatives that an institution will take on, or a department will be like, okay, well, let's try this. And then it doesn't work, in that 2 or 3 or 6 month window, and it's like, well, let's throw it out.
Experimentation.
Yeah. And I think all too often, it's really unfortunate that they didn't take it far enough to actually get the real lesson, or run with it long enough to understand that it's just going to take that long to change culture within the department or within the larger institution, and that it might take that long to start attracting that kind of talent that will then also help to shift the culture. So yeah, I think that process-oriented question for me is sort of the crux.
So we're going to move on to the next question.
Can I actually just...
Well, that's up to these guys because they've been flagging us for 2
quickly
minutes.
to that? But I want to respond quickly to what I've heard here. For the group here, everybody has these great ideas for initiatives, for things that you want to change in your institution. And my advice would be reach out to your peers, find out who has done similar change, get an idea of how long you need to achieve some change or see any kind of result. And then before you take off on your initiative, get approval, not even approval, get an understanding with your leadership. We can't start measuring results until this point. Is this a 3-year initiative? Is it a 5-year initiative? And be honest at year 1, you may see nothing. And if we're going to do this, we need to commit to doing this, especially if you're working in bringing a community of color or a community that's not otherwise represented into your institution. You can't be 6 months in and then kick the community out because you're not creating a good sense of collaboration as an institution. So it's making sure your leadership understands how soon you can achieve some change. With our theater company, the Native Theater Company, we're at year 20.
I need to hold you, Robin. I have to hold you. No more examples for this one because we're moving on to the next question, and I'm sure that this is going to come up in the next question, I promise.